Namaste, good evening all. Welcome to the last session, the concluding session of the Shastri Memorial Series talks. So sit comfortably, back straight. Let the eyes be gently closed. Bring the awareness to the breath. Observe the normal breathing for a few rounds. Let's start with 3 rounds of Omkara. Each time you breathe in, as you breathe out, continue with the Om chanting. Inhale. Om. Arms together in Namaskara Mudra. Omkara in the prayer all together. Breathe in. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Gently go down. With a few blinks, you can open your eyes. Namaste, welcome all again to the last day of our Let Go series, Discovering Lasting Happiness. As we have seen from the day one till yesterday, all of us have been practicing yoga. Yeah, we have been doing our asana practice, the pranayama, meditation, and relaxation. But it's very important that we also know the theory behind the practice. So that is where all these discussions that was held in last presentation, which were presented by the different teachers of Yoga Bharati. So again, what is yoga? Yoga we saw is mana prashamana upaya. Yeah, it's a solution to calm down the mind, is what Yoga Vasishta says. And Sage Patanjali says that yoga chitta vritti nirodha is a mastery over the modification of the mind. Yeah, mind is very chanchal. We are there sitting here listening to the talks, but then again you're thinking of either what has happened earlier or what is going to happen tomorrow. Yeah, so that way the mind is chanchal, and Sri Krishna says, yes, the mind is as hard to control as the wind. So these were all different practices. We saw the knowledge part of it, and then later the sadhana that we need to do so that the mind comes to a calm, silent state. So right from the Atma Pariksha, we saw that the qualities of the Atman. We are all part of the universal consciousness. So we are the Jivatma. So what is the quality of that universal consciousness? So we saw that it is the Ananda, the expansive state. That is the quality of the universal consciousness. So right from that, then we saw the Sukha Dukkha Pariksha, where we saw that it is not the Sukha is that the object, but it is the state of the mind when we are experiencing that Sukha, experiencing that Ananda. So that is what we need to observe. So that is what we need to do the experiment on. The prakriyas, different prakriyas we saw. So, but can we also do our own prakriyas? So whenever you're doing any work, if your mind is calm, you're very engrossed in your work, yeah, without much disturbance, just take a pause and just observe how your mind is. Whether the mind is calm, just going with the flow in whatever you're doing. So that way you can do your own experiment. Or whenever you're angry or restless, just pause, be aware that why am I getting angry? How is my mind when I'm angry or restless? So that again is like an experiment that you can do. So we saw that in Sukha Dukkha Pariksha or the Avastatraya Prasthana, or we also saw that these were the knowledge part. And then in the parts of yoga. We saw the Jnana Marga, Yoga Marga, which they say requires certain commitment, certain discipline for you all to follow these two paths, and which is not that everybody is into these two paths. So again, we saw the Karma Kanda, the Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, which all of us are doing all these activities every day, but maybe we didn't realize that yes, oh, these are also part of our yoga. It can be called yoga. Karma Yoga we saw right from the Jnana Yoga, Yoga Marga. Then yesterday we saw the Karma Yoga. How every activity can become a karma yoga when you have that peace of mind. And with that state, with that peace in mind, you continue with the activity. And then in bhakti yoga, all of us have that love within us, but can we elevate that love? Instead of expecting everything that, oh, I'm giving this, so I also need it. Can we just give in love? That is what transcends us from that prema to the bhakti bhava. So today's talk, so I would request Raghuramji to sum up on the whole of what was done the whole week and then give his also insight about what is our dharma. So we've seen all this. So what is our dharma? What is it required for us to do? What we need to do a little more in all these different paths. So over to Raghuramji.
Namaste everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this series of talks. Especially today, the last day, we are on the topic of dharma. All these days that what we have discussed with various teachers, as Vijaya put it, as it is that they are all paths which are like yoga, but then all these things can be in the form of a beautiful necklace or a garland when we talk about dharma, which fits and all those things, which we will see at the end of today's talk. And so let me pick up this idea that all these things what we are doing, one thing that we know, it is a part of dharma, we say. And dharma seems to be a word which has no equivalent word in anywhere in the world in any other literature. It's a very unique word. Radhakrishnan says it's a word which is untranslatable. But then unfortunately people translated dharma to be religion, but it has a very, very limited meaning if it has any meaning. But then otherwise dharma is so lofty. So that's why today I thought of discussing with you about dharma, because this is one particular aspect that Shastriji discussed with so passionately. And we have gone in depth in analyzing these aspects of dharma during our various meetings and conversations and all that. Now, and that also this dharma is supposed to be Sanatana dharma. Many times people call it very rightly, saying that don't call it as a religion, Hinduism. It is a Sanatana dharma. Now, call it a Sanatana dharma, that's a kind of right kind of a thing. But then let us try to understand this word called as Sanatana dharma, out of which Sanatana is ever existing. That means it never dies and it's always there. It never undergoes any elimination, but it is definitely going to be there. Whenever Krishna says that yada yada dharmasya glanir bharata abhyuttanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. When he says that dharmasya glanir bhavati, many times people translate it as when dharma declines. Dharma cannot even decline also. It is always there. Only thing is, it is covered, it is clouded. And from that clouded state, that abhyuttanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Krishna, or in other words, it is the humanism, the universal value is something which is going to bring it up again. The divinity is going to bring it up again. Tadatmanam srijamyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinayashaya cha dushkrutam dharma samsthapanadhaya sambhavam yuge yuge. These are the essentially two qualities. Sadhunam paritranaya and then dushkrutam vinashaya. These are the two aspects that are there essentially as the part of dharma. So therefore, I just gave the little background, but I have not really explained about dharma. Now the question comes, what is this particular dharma? Why we call it as dharma, Sanatana dharma? Well, this word seemed to be very, very well known to us, familiar to us, but yet we really do not know. Familiar because that even ordinary, unschooled, simple person will also say that what is dharma? Immediately say very clearly, "Arey, what is this? There should be some dharma. Whatever that I take, I should give it back." See, people, they themselves say that. And similarly, a beggar comes to you and then he asks for some support and says, "Please do dharma." Dharmam journey. Not only in this, in all over the country, in all over this culture, that the dharma seems to be a very popular word. Particularly a boy, a stronger person is hitting a weaker person, immediately you interfere and say that, "Hey, this is not dharma. You should not do this. Come on, tell me what happened." Even if he has done something wrong, you should not beat him like that. So like that, dharma seems to be something which is a commonplace word. But then when somebody is asked what is dharma, then he will get confused because the dharma seems to be so vast. Like every day getting up in the morning and doing Sandhya Vandana, for somebody it is dharma. And then going to the temple is a dharma. And putting the bindi is supposed to be a dharma in any places. And putting the vermilion on the forehead is supposed to be a dharma. And observing the practices like, the Shivratri, these are all supposed to be dharma. Or not doing the fast on the day when the Shraddha is there, and the previously day fasting is supposed to be dharma. Variety things are there in dharma. Therefore, one way it looks very simple, but the other way it is also confusing. Now, another important aspect, last one that I would like to tell about is that what we are yoga teachers, we are discussing about yoga, and yoga belongs to every culture. I mean, it can go anywhere. Presently today, West also accepted yoga. What is the connection between this yoga and dharma? There's another very big riddle that we have. Anyway, very simple way when we try to understand what dharma is. Dharma seem to be a property of something. When I say property, even the property word is something which is very having a different kind of directions. But like for the simple thing is, water flows downwards. This is what we call it as water's property. And this property, water flowing downwards, is what is called as dharma of the water. And the fire burns in the upper direction. Dharma of the fire is to burn in the upper direction. Similarly, dharma of a rose plant is to give rose flower. Dharma of the sun to rise on the east. So these are all supposed to be the dharma. The essential qualities, essential properties of objects that are in the world outside is supposed to be dharma. When we come to a little more deeper than that, a plant, rose plant giving rose flower is dharma. A lily giving lily is dharma. So this is another plant level. But another important aspect is that there are some plants which give flowers after flowers after flowers, whereas some plants that one crop of flowers and then gone. Why it is that? Look at the other plant is giving so many flowers, everyday flowers, whereas look at you, you are only giving one flower and then you are dying. And then the plant says that that is its dharma, this is my dharma, that's all. To fly is the dharma of the bird, swim is the dharma of the water, or fish, and then fish will not say, I cannot fly, that's not my dharma. I don't even attempt on that. It looks very simple, it looks very easy. But then when it comes to the human being, it becomes complex. Complex in the sense, what is my dharma? What is your dharma? What is other person's dharma? If killing is a dharma, then what about the person who is executing? He's also killing. And we send the troops on the border to kill the people. Is it not dharma? No, he's protecting the country. Oh, so that means to say, this is one dharma and that is another dharma. These things are coming in the way. So it becomes like complex. We cannot fix the dharma as it is. Therefore, let us try to understand that when dharma has to be conflicting like that. Because why it conflicts? Because human being is supposed to be a complex personality. Not like a fish, not like a bird, not like a plant giving a flower. Not like a river which is flowing in the downward direction. It's not like that. It's much more complex. Therefore, we need to understand the aspect of dharma with respect to human being. So when we try to understand that, a very simple thing which we could think of is that moment human being comes, then what need to happen is that there should be a different kind of set of things that need to be done. See, at the animal level, until animal level, it's okay. An animal is that a tiger kills a deer and then eats. And then, no, it is ahimsa. The tiger should not kill a deer. Tiger says, Papa, that's my food. And I kill and I eat. But then there is another check on that particular aspect of it. That is, tiger does not kill a deer if he is not hungry. So that means there is a check on that. Similarly, in the forest, that there are so many other animals are also there. They're all there. Some people call it as forest law is supposed to be might is right. Animal law is might is right. Please don't use that kind of word, because animals have their own limit, their own understanding. That is, an animal kills when he is hungry, but the next moment that he doesn't kill, he just keeps quiet. He doesn't abuse that. Just like human being is hungry, he eats food. He is not hungry, also he eats food. He can abuse. This is what happens in the case of human being. Look at the way that how people behave, the human being. Like animals, they do not interfere with each other. They just do their job. They are there, very fine. Bees are there, they follow the line. And then birds are there. You look at the way that they fly in the sky. They have a formation, they fly. They don't try to push, elbow the others and then come. But look at Bangalore street or anywhere in India. The streets are vehicles. They try to push the other and get into it, and this and that, all kinds of things happen. So therefore, what we require is that a very simple thing is we need a law. Let's go from that. If human being has to exist, we have to have laws. Otherwise, might is right will not work. And that's what is basically the way that earlier primitive man used to be, might is right. If I have a might, I can do it. And even till today, might is right is the way that a lot of people practice. They are not human beings. They are subhuman beings. I am in the power, therefore I can really arm twist anybody. That's what we see every day. So where is the question of law? Where is the question of nyaya? So therefore, human being, if he has to survive, we have to have a simple law that live and let live. I have to live and I should let you also live. This is a simple law which is called as nyaya. And this is what our people have given from time to time, place to place, and all those things. Like for example, same road. We have to use both the vehicles and both the directions, upward direction, downward direction. Then we made a simple law saying that everybody goes on the left side of the road. Therefore, opposite vehicles also can easily go because that is their left side and your left side. How beautiful it is. England made a different rule. Every vehicle should go on the left side that they manage. America made the opposite rule. Everybody goes on the right side. They also manage very fine. But in India, unless until you have a road divider, people do not follow the rule. That's unfortunate thing that is. So therefore, we should have an enforcement agent law. Like that, I can go on telling several laws to see that how enforcement authority has to come. Like for example, I buy certain thing and then he charges money. And then now because it's a crisis, pandemic, COVID, and somebody wants to take advantage of this, charges you an arm and length, then there is an authority on the top of it to say that no, you cannot charge like that. The charge for this is like this. Unfortunately, that we are not following that. Look at the misery that we have. But then authorities are there to follow that. That's why we have to have an enforcement authority called the police, enforcement authority called the judiciary system. All these things are born along with that. One day I was traveling in USA, in Chicago. Middle of the night, no other vehicle is there. Only my friend, myself, we were going at the vehicle. And then there was a stop sign. He stopped. I said, why did you stop? I said, there is a stop sign. No, I've seen stop sign also, but then why did you stop? I stopped so that any vehicle in the opposite direction, they can also go use it. I said, there's no vehicle. Why did you stop? He said, if police will catch if I don't stop. I said, look, there is no police at all. Who is there to catch? Immediately he pulled the car aside. And by that time he was so enraged because of my questioning. Pulled the car aside and said, get out of my car. I said, why? I said, there is a rule. And then you are questioning that rule? The rule belongs to me. Don't question that. Such a wonderful statement. So therefore, all these laws that are there, they are for us. They're ours. Like the way the dress is yours, the house is yours, and this is yours. Laws are also yours. A country, a culture which adapts the laws of their own, then you don't require any law enforcement authority, law judgment authority. All those things are not there. Just think of it. Is it not a burden on the exchequer? And this culture, at one time, 500 years back, we had a culture where we didn't have law enforcement authority. That's what Macaulay said, that the houses in this culture, that they do not lock their houses because there no thief walks in. Nobody takes anybody else's. The judges do not have work. That's what Kalidasa writes. So that means to say this, we were not only having the laws, but laws belong to us. We are proud of our laws. We don't have any authority to say that they have to enforce the law. You are afraid of police because that you have done something wrong. When you are doing according to the law, there is a question of fear, whether it is enforcement directorate or the police, whether it is Central Bureau of Investigation, anything that comes up, you can be courageous, you can be happy. You see, the fear element is not there if you follow the laws. I wish we don't even have to go to Dharma. We just follow the laws. We can create a beautiful India. We can create a wonderful Bharat. Okay, law is fine, but what about Dharma? Dharma is not only takes care of law, but it goes one step ahead. It fulfills much more than that. How do you say that? What is meant by Dharma? According to law, I earn money. I'm giving a just simple hypothetical example. I earn money and then I spend all that money for myself. Nobody questions me. I go for vacation. I do this. I do that. I don't have neither the burden of parents. I don't have neither burden of children. I don't have anybody. And I lavishly spend that money whenever opportunity comes. Diwali comes, I just burn all the crackers that are so, everything I do it. Nobody can find fault with me. But whereas with that money, I give it to somebody who's in need. This is what is basically, I'm rising above the level of law, above the level of nyaya. I'm fulfilling, taking care of law. I'm not violating the law, but I go one step above the level of law. I don't use any machinery or anything like that. This is what is going above the level of law. And that is what is called as dharma. Why it is called as dharma, I'll come to it later. But we have such examples in this culture, plenty of examples. We have in the other cultures also, we have examples like the way Jesus Christ, whatever that he was giving for the people poor and all that. You look at the way that he has raised above the level of nyaya, is that punishing somebody does a mistake, punish is somebody according to the law. Whereas an adulteress was there and Jesus came there and they asked his opinion. You always talk about compassion. What do we do with this lady? Should we stone her to death? Jesus Christ is so full of compassion. He said, yeah, you can stone her, but let the first stone be from the person who has not done any adultery in his life, because he only has a moral authority to do that. People just left. See, that means to say, to punish is one thing which is supposed to be law, and to pardon is rising above the level of law. And that rising above the level of law is supposed to be dharma. We have umpteen number of examples in our culture. I don't want to go all those details because the time is limited. But I'll take one simple example. Rama, he was to be coronated next day. He was prince, supposed to be prince. But then design what happened, divine design, that his stepmother Kaikeyi says that Rama has to go to the forest for 14 years. Bharata will be the kingdom, will be ruling the kingdom. What is, when Rama heard from Kaikeyi that father was there, said, Kaikeyi says, Rama, I'm telling something which is serious, and then sit down, pay attention to it, and then have a glass of water. Rama asks, what is that? He says, you are going to go to the forest for 14 years because this is what your father promised me. What is Rama's answer to Kaikeyi? Mother, I'm going to the forest too, but then you said something which is serious. That means what is this is not even serious for him. He already accepted. And there the discussion goes on between, other people. Kausalya and Lakshmana and Rama was there. The discussion goes on. Kausalya says, Rama, what elders say, you do it as a mother. She just surrenders. Whereas Lakshmana takes up the issue. And then he says that, Rama, you don't have to go to the forest. Because according to this particular Raghuvamsha, the eldest should rule the kingdom. So you are the eldest, therefore kingdom belongs to you. No law comes in way. Similarly, there is another rule because of which that you don't have to go to the forest, and that is, democracy is the rule. Let the people, vote to the people. Let the people decide whether they want Bharata or whether they want you as a ruler. And obviously they want you to be the ruler. That's what the second is. Third reason, which is supposed to be logical. Third reason he gives is that, look at dad, he's not well. I think he seemed to have some problem, old age and the dementia, all those things are there. So let's first of all medically test him. If medically is okay, then we can follow this. But then if it's not that, then we don't have to hurry about that. And fourth reason, he says, Kshatriya reason, he says, Rama, what does Bharata and his mother, what do the Bharata and mother think about it? Kingdom belongs to the people, and then let the people decide who do they want. And another thing is, I'm here standing with my arm, and then let somebody defeat me and take the kingdom from you, let it go. All these things are Kshatriya Dharma and the Nyaya Dharma. This and all that, all these things are about the Nyaya. But then Rama sweeps it aside and says that, Lakshmana, you don't know the ways of Dharma. You're only talking about Nyaya. I'm going to the forest. And then he went away to the forest. That means to say, raises above the level of Nyaya. That's what is Dharma. Like that, we have several examples. But then let me give an example which is from the simple day-to-day life, which happened maybe earlier. Like, I met one lady, I don't know whether you remember her name, Bachindri Pal. The greatness, we both were together in one of the UNO conferences, and then the greatness of that lady is that, she was an Everest climber 2 times, first lady to go to Everest. Second time she went without oxygen. She made tons of money maybe because basically she has all kinds of things. She's also one of the top executives in Tata's. Now she is out of that. But then the greatness of it is all those things are there. She was a bachelor, but she runs her whole thing like an orphanage. That means to say all the people from the hill places, they take shelter under her. Food, clothing, and expenses, everything was spent by her. She would not have 1 penny for herself. What a wonderful way. That means whatever that you get, you spend it, it is Nyaya. But you give much more than that. You give all that to the charity. That's what is Dharma. It's not like 1% charity, 10% charity. No. From the heart, you give it everything. This is what is the idea of Dharma. Dharma rises above the level of Nyaya. There's no passing. Similarly, we have one lady. She sits in a small little temple and then makes the garlands and flower garlands and every day to the God. And then whoever Bhakta comes, with a very nominal price, she gives that, enjoys that process of doing all those things. And then when interviewer came to her and asked, what is this here? He said, I'm selling these flowers, garlands, and then I will run with my life with this particular thing. And I told my brother, please don't come here. And who is her brother? Her brother is UP Chief Minister, and that is what is Adityanath. And that lady said, don't even tell my brother. And I told my brother, please don't come here. And also don't make anything like that. That's the kind of lady she is. Look at the way anybody from any position like that, family, would they live like that? What an amount of, this is what is raising above the level of Nyaya to Dharma. Dharma takes care of Nyaya, law, and then rises above that. Similarly, Karna, in the battlefield, he was Danashur, he gives everything. That was what is the way that he would do. And then gave everything. He gave Kavacha, Kundalas, everything. And then he was alone in the battlefield and he lost his life doing something extraordinary. So what are all these stories indicate about this is that Dharma takes care of Nyaya, law, rises above the level of Nyaya. What is the way it rises above the level of Nyaya? There are 3-4 principles that are involved. First principle is that you have give charity is the first one. Whether the east or west, north or east, south, they don't keep money for themselves, they charity. And second thing, very important thing is they have love, compassion. These are the feelings that are there through which that they operate. It's not the law that operates, it's the compassion and love. These are the things which operate. And third important thing that is not given much here, but then it is Indriya Nigraha, self-control, discipline. This is what is the part of Dharma. Of course, there is one more part. That's what is your faith in God is one thing that people added. But even if the faith in God is not there, all these 3 things, they 4 things which are charity, compassion, love, and then discipline, self-discipline. These are the things which form the part of Dharma. And when you look at it, every religion actually is supposed to have given some element of these things in the religion. Like for example, in Islam, when you take it, in the Ramadan period, people do not eat food during the day, not even gulp of water. They wait till the night, and the night they eat food. And that in the Arabic area, when you think of it, even the glass of water they can eat only after the sunset, which happens around 8 o'clock in the evening. And then again, 4 o'clock in the morning, they are up, sun is already up. So that means they have a small little window of 4 or 5 hours in which they eat, and the rest of the day they don't eat. Is it not something like an Indriya Nigraha? Similarly, sense control. And nobody is watching. It comes from within. When you say Christianity, during the time of the Easter, they don't eat meat. I didn't know about that when I was traveling in East European countries one time during the Easter time. And then my friend and myself, we went into one of the Orthodox churches, and then there were nuns. And then we sat for food, and then my friend told the nun that he is only vegetarian, he doesn't eat meat, he doesn't eat egg. Then that lady very innocently said, nun said, no, Easter is over 3 days back, now you can eat meat. Then my friend replied saying that, no, he never ate meat, he never eats meat. Wow, he must be spiritual. That means the content of not eating meat is a part of Dharma, spirituality. It is their idea. Like that, everywhere it is like that. So therefore, really in every activity that you do it, incorporate consciously from within love, compassion, charity, and sense control, Indriya Nigraha. When you bring in all those things, that's what is Dharma. So therefore, actually Dharma has been defined. But now, what else to be done? Well, there are certain Dharma conflicts that are there. And they are there like that. One Dharma follows the other. One Dharma is conflicting with the other Dharma. Like for example, Dharma is, one of the Dharmas is that you please take care of somebody who is in need of shelter. You give him. But then that person is supposed to be a robber. Should I hand over him to the police or should I give him a shelter? You see, this is the Dharma Sandigdha. Similarly, Dharma Sandigdha, that is, there is that I have only one morsel of food, and then whether I give it to somebody, one or other, who deserves, who does not, So these are the things like that. In fact, during the freedom struggle, there are people who went for the call of the nation, but then the parents are there at home. Should we take care of the parent, or should we go follow the call of the nation? So that means to say there is one dharma conflict with the other dharma. And the same kind of a conflict was there in the case of even our people from the legend, from our Itihasa. Bhishma has given a word that he will not marry. But then occasion came that he was supposed to marry Amba. His own teacher said, forget about it, marry Amba. Bhishma said, no. Is Bhishma wrong? Or if he married Amba, was it wrong? See, all these questions are there. Rama, supposed to be Dharmatma, but he was standing behind the tree and then hit Vali. Is it Dharma? Is it Adharma? So we were caught up in this particular Dharma conflicts. So therefore, we need to go fundamentally, what's about Dharma? So when we go to the fundamentals of Dharma, as I said, Dharma is love, compassion, charity, give it to the others, and also self-control, discipline yourself. These are the aspects of Dharma. In a Christian, theological study, a professor, he was asked a similar kind of question by the student, saying that you as a Christianity professor, you say that you give charity, you give others, out of earnings, you give it. And therefore, that when somebody is in need, that you take care of him, sacrifice your life for these things, and then all that you said. Why should I do it? Why should I do the charity? I earn money, I spend money. Why should I take care of somebody's needs? Why should I not tell a lie if it is going to help me? See, tell me, what's the reason? And the professor honestly said in that book he has written, that I said that you should follow these things because Jesus Christ said, because Bible says that, follow the Bible, 10 commandments talk about that. The same thing about the other texts also say that. In fact, Islam very vehemently say that whatever that Quran says, that you should follow that by every word, spirit. And same way, Talmud also says these are the things that are there. Jewish texts also talk about that. Everybody talks about that way, that you believe in Jesus Christ, therefore that you should follow that. That why he replied me in that class, the professor writes that you believe in Jesus Christ and you follow that. I don't believe in Jesus Christ, why should I follow? Tell me an answer without the support of Jesus Christ. And the professor honestly confesses in that book saying that when he asked that question, I didn't have an answer. And without Jesus Christ, I could not say that. And then he says that the day, and this is the same content which is there in every religion also, and the day any religion talks about all these qualities of love, compassion, etc., not with the help of God, not with the help of Jesus Christ, then we will be okay. Then that particular culture survives. Same way with us. Rama went to the forest. I would immediately raise up a question saying that Rama is a fool. He did not have to go to the forest. He would have said that, father, forget about it. I'm not going to the forest. I'm going to be the prince. So what's wrong about it? In fact, I find fault with Rama. Not only he went, he took Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana along with him. He put their life also into risk. He is a useless fellow. He is a... So this way we have a courage to talk about that. Dharma can be opposed. And he says that if Dharma has to be upheld, that means the religion. So we have to answer these questions. Because of that reason only, that today there are hardly less and less people are believing in Bible, less and less believe in the Christianity to the core. They say that yes, we are Christians just to follow surah rules. Otherwise, we are not really Christians. We don't want into discussions. Islam definitely stops you from discussing at all. So therefore, basically, there are hardly any followers who are doing that because the religions do not give an answer. Same way, Hinduism also, when you look at Hinduism, the conventional Hinduism cannot have an answer. But only thing is that the knowledge that is given by the Upanishads, they are the only texts who can give an answer for these questions. That's why Upanishads are the most wonderful, extraordinary literature of this particular culture. And while talking about this, while explaining about that, you don't have to go for any mysticism, saying that God is all pervasive, God is this. It's a concept that is there, but it is not that he will punish you. A lot of people say that he will push you into hell. Bertrand Russell said, why I'm not a Christian? He said that it's such a illogical argument. That is, whole life, whatever the sins that I have done, if I put them together, I don't deserve an eternal condemnation into hell. Maybe you can punish me for about 10 years, 5 years, then I can come out of it. But then there is no way to come out of it. Christianity doesn't believe. So forever I'm condemned. He said the person is there who did a serial killing of 100 people. He is also in the same hell. And I'm also in the same hell. And the hell, he is the senior than me. So if I find a torture from him also there in hell. Therefore, he said, I'm not a Christian. And the same thing happens with our people also. Youngsters, they rebel. Because our people say that there is heaven, there is hell. And if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, if you don't do this Shraddha Karma, then you will go to that hell. Where is that? Garuda Purana talks about it. This Purana. They said, you believe in Garuda Purana? I don't believe it. You read and I don't read it. So this is what basically the religion finds basically rebel from within, from the youngsters, because youngsters are intellectuals. They start questioning it. And only Upanishads can give an answer. How does it give an answer? Upanishad says, all right, you don't want to do the charity, you don't want to do this discipline. Yes, I don't want to do the discipline. Forget about God. Let's not worry about God. But even these things, love, compassion, and then doing all these things, why don't you want to do it? Why don't you want to do the fasting on a Shraddha day? Why don't you want to do the fasting? Or on this particular, and these days people come out with an idea saying that, yeah, fasting one day is good for health. It's a very nominal reason that you are giving. You are not giving a dharmic reason for that. He says that, like, yeah, my life is fine. It is enough, all right. I don't have to do the fasting to take care of my health. So therefore, basically, that is a way that people try to go beyond that. But then Upanishad says, first of all, why don't you want to do this? Why don't you want to do the fasting? Because food gives me joy. Food gives me happiness. Therefore, I want to eat food. I don't want to fast. I just don't want to miss a meal, because that I'm losing my happiness if I don't take that food 3 times, 4 times, 5 times a day, whatever it is. I'm habituated to that. Similarly, charity. If I have that money, I can go for the world tour, I can go for this, I can go for more gadgets and all that. Why do you have to do the charity? And that fellow doesn't even deserve that charity because he spoiled his own health by himself. Why do we do all that? And I know very well that the person who is dying out of cancer, he doesn't have any recovery from the cancer. How do I do the charity? So therefore, all these things are questioned by the youngsters. This is where Vedanta comes into the picture. Upanishads knowledge comes into the picture, because Upanishads do not take these questions at the ordinary level. Upanishad take the questions at the fundamental level. Like the way simple thing is, ordinary level questioning is what happens after death, which means basically what happens after the death of that person, about the property, about his thing and all those things, and all that work project that he has taken up, what happens to him. This is a very simple question. But fundamental question is what happens after death for him, that person. Does he remain? Does he go anywhere else? Or is it totally complete? And this is a very important fundamental question, because fundamental questions are the eternal questions. They always are there. They do not die. One way or the other, you answer it, they will not die. Like the way that how the water is formed, it's not a fundamental question. Somebody said oxygen, hydrogen put together becomes water, and that becomes easy. Now that question doesn't exist. You have the answer. We have a different question now. How the oxygen is formed, how the hydrogen is formed, that's a different level. But then this question, how water is formed, is lost. But then what happens after death? If somebody answers the question saying that absolutely nothing remains, death means like select all, delete, the file is closed and burnt away, finish, that's all. But then look at the importance of that question. That person will go to somebody else and say, Raghuram says after the death, nothing survives. Do you also believe the same way? Or some soul exists? You see, whether belief or no belief, but the question is that the question survives. It is what is eternal questions, fundamental questions. Somebody like Buddha also faced the same question, what happens after death? Immediately he went in search of what is the death. That means these questions are so powerful. At the fundamental level, when you take it, it can create a Buddha. Similarly, who am I? Everybody talks about this ego so much. Everybody is egoistic. I like myself. I don't want to question me, whatever that I say, particularly my children, my husband should not question me, or my wife. How audacious she questions me. Hey, who is this I? Have you ever thought about this I? We use it. But there is one person who started questioning Nanyar. Who is this I? Who am I? And he became a Ramana Maharshi. That means these questions, when you take it to the fundamental level, we operate them at a very local level, and they don't really give us the deep answers. When you take the fundamental level, they make a saint out of it, a Buddha, a Ramana Maharshi out of those questions. Similarly, one fundamental question is about the happiness. And that's what that boy stuck in. He says that if I do not eat food, I suffer. I don't have joy. I must enjoy. I must enjoy the food myself before giving to anybody else. Whatever I eat, and if it's something remaining, then I give it. So this is what is the fundamental question that is there, is that my happiness you are robbing. Similarly, you say, do the charity, that means you are putting into my pocket your hand to rob my happiness. I don't want to give my happiness to anybody else. I would like to have happiness myself. This is where Upanishad take this fundamental question. Don't look at what gives you happiness, look at what is happiness. And it is eloquently said in Upanishad. This is what Shastriji pointed out. First time, how to take this question to the fundamental level. And we don't have a courage to take it to the fundamental level. We are always satisfied that this gives me happiness. But then take to the fundamental level, what is the experience called happiness? Sukham eva labdhva karoti, na sukham labdhva na karoti, sukham eva vijignyasitam jamiti. We should understand what happiness itself is. Wow, this opens a new vista altogether, new horizon altogether in front of us. Why? Because I see that I have concluded that object gives me happiness, food gives me happiness, but look at my short-sightedness, that this food gave me happiness only for about 2 hours, maybe even less than that. Something else is now hanging on me, and that's what is giving me misery. And now I say that I get happiness, I take care of it, but another few hours. So like that, my unhappiness is shifting from place to place, item to item, simply because object does not give you lasting happiness. Whatever that object is giving you is a temporary happiness. Okay, all right. Maybe it is a temporary happiness. I don't mind that. But let me go for this object which gives me temporary happiness. The student is very adamant. And then Upanishads are all equally capable of answering these questions. Upanishad says that, okay, these things you say, the temporary happiness, you go for more and more object for giving you happiness, fine. Even that also let us examine. How does it happen? What happens is that one object gives you happiness and then it became obsolete, and second object, third object, go on multiplying these objects. And ultimately what happens is that you accumulate so many objects that are there, thinking that they are giving you happiness, but you come across that object only once in a while. And the rest of the time, you're only guarding that happiness. That's what Swadhyaya Ritambara says. What you use it, you're a master of that. And what you don't use it, and you keep it in your cupboard, you're a watchman for that. We're all big watchmen. We have so much accumulated objects. It's all right, I accumulate. Even then, you did not convince me that why should I not go to the object outside. This is what Bhartrhari says in Niti Sutras, Subhashita Shatkas. He says that, Nadatu kama kamanam upabhoge nasyamyate. What happens with us is that an object which gives me apparently giving me happiness, you see that sooner or later you get enslaved by the object. One cup of coffee gives me happiness. It starts like that. Okay, I got 1 cup in the morning, 1 cup in the evening. It becomes 2, and 2 becomes 3 because I have a headache. Therefore, I should take a coffee. And this way, what happens is it goes on multiplying without even your knowledge. You get used to it. So therefore, your senses lose their ability to sustain that appetite. This is what is unfortunate thing. And more that you go behind the object, you see it has come with a small print. That means to say it comes with so much of other agenda. It's not just giving happiness, but other agenda behind that. Like the way that sweets give you happiness. You are really fond of sweets. But then the moment you see the sweets, you become miserable. Why? Because the doctor said that your sugar levels in your body, in your own storehouse, is beyond danger limits. Now you can't go for that. You cannot. And you'll cut others. They are enjoying it. You cannot enjoy it. Wow, what a terrible state. Same thing about the other objects also. They don't give you any more happiness. On the other hand, they'll give you misery. Object goes on multiplying. Object goes on increasing. And then it comes with a small print. Like for example, you go to the shop and see the madam goes to the shop and sees a nice, wonderful, beautiful sari. And then she says, wow, this is the ultimate sari, ultimate happiness. She goes for that sari, expensive sari. She bargains all those things and packs up and comes home. Till she comes home, she's walking on the sky, on the air. And then once she comes home, she keeps it in the safe cupboard. But then now the problem comes up, because a sari sitting in cupboard will not give you happiness. You have to put it on. But then you can't wear that expensive sari and go to buy some kothimiri outside in the market. See, that's miserable. So therefore, you have to choose a proper occasion. What is that occasion? You find a marriage. Of course, during COVID, you can't do it. But anyway, normal course of time. And then you look for all your family tree. You never cared for that family tree, but now you look at. And all those youngsters who are there, marriageable age, you look for that. Call them. They never expect a call from this auntie, but then auntie calls them, talks to them nicely. Beta, Are bhaiya, time ho gaya. When are you getting married? You go on hunting, like a marriage bureau hunting. You are going hunting, and finally you catch hold of one bakra. Somebody is there who is getting married. Wow, 3 months later. That 3 months later, whether the couple who are going to get married, they sleep or not. But you lose your sleep because you are dreaming all the time that you wear that sari, go for that party. And you go there, glittering, wonderful, extraordinary. And everybody comes across, he looks at you, smiles, and nicely greets you and saying that, how is your husband? How is the business going on? How is everything? How is your son doing? How is your daughter doing? Every other question they ask, they don't ask about the sari. You know what? Ordinary sari will give you ordinary misery. Expensive sari will give you expensive misery. And you start cursing yourself. Why did I buy this sari? I should have bought the other sari, even if it is something more. But then she is a, Jhansi Lakshmi. So she does not give up the battle so easily. So, in this big marriage function, there are people who are going with the glasses of various juices, this and that. She didn't want to take chance with some juice or something like that. So she goes to a fellow who's actually taking the glasses of water, kicks him, and the water spills on the sari. And expensive sari, everybody looks at her. People start like, how much did you pay? She says, X amount. Wow. Once she heard that expression, now she's so happy. See, look at the way, how much you have to struggle in the objective world outside to give you happiness. Indriyanam jarayanti tejaha. That means your sensory organs lose their patutva. Object loses its importance. You see a wonderful movie, second time you cannot know it. This is what is diminishing utility. Disturbing. But then happiness is something which is true. object giving happiness is not true. But then what is giving you happiness? This is what Upanishad says. Every time you're in the state of happiness, your mind is becoming quiet. You're listening to the music, see what happens to you. Music is going on, and the rest of the mind is really quiet because the whole mind became quiet. How does the mind become quiet? This is where Shastriji beautifully analyzed the idea of boredom. See, what happens is that we all go through the experience of boredom, but we never try to analyze what is boredom. Look at what boredom. You sit down and try to see what happens to you when you're bored. You're restless. Where is that restlessness coming? Look at it, restlessness is in the mind. A beautiful example of the energy that he has given. Wherever the energy packs up and becomes pressurized, that pressure we call it as boredom. The pressured state is boredom. And boredom is always in the head. It's not in the stomach. It's not in the legs. Boredom is in the head. How does boredom happen in the head? This is where the yogic knowledge will help us to understand this. Yoga says that our energy constantly moves in the upward direction to take care of various activities. Particularly human being, because that is vertical and the energy moves up, goes into various parts of the body, and that energy which is getting packed up, we try to spend that energy various activities, and that spending of the energy gets emptiness in the mind, which we call it as silence, and that silence portion is giving us happiness. It's not the music which is giving us happiness. Every time you are listening to the music, the sound vibrations fall into your ear, and then that vibrations resonate, dragging, sucking energy from the brain into that. Therefore, that it is matching, therefore it sucks. The mind space becomes empty, and that emptiness gives you happiness. Imagine if that sound has no ability to suck your energy inside. That means if it is a rattling sound, you get headache. It does not suck your energy. You do not feel happy. Similarly, when you go to the park, when you go to the beach, you just look at the nature outside, such a beautiful nature, expansive nature. Energy is drawn through your eyes so that you become empty in your mind. Therefore, people, when they go to the park like that and sit down in a beautiful beach, and somebody asks them a question, hey, wait, let's have nice, wonderful time in this beach. Let's not bring about all those topics. We refuse to think. This is what Shastri used to say, Manaha Pitva, mind refuses to think. In fact, before going to food in the congregational place, when we are all sitting for the food, everybody is chit-chatting, because chit-chatting is a nice, wonderful way to spend your boredom energy inside. And then you are chit-chatting, gossiping. Suddenly the food is served. The moment food is served, that immediately you start eating. The moment you start eating, then the energy that is packed up in your head regions will be drawn by the sensory organ. Look at the way that in front of the sweet, when you have a sweet in front of you, look at the way that you look at the sweet, immediately salivary glands activate. Your whole nervous system starts really ziggling, and all those things happen. That means how much of energy is rushing to those areas. And that rushing areas will give you emptiness inside. So when you're eating food, your mind is empty. When you're listening to the music, your mind is empty. You're watching a movie, your mind is empty. And you are gossiping, mind is empty. And that emptiness is what is giving you happiness. Therefore, whether you're eating the food, the happiness that you have, gossiping, the happiness that you get, listening to music, the happiness you get, is the same happiness. Only thing is that the quantum may be different, but the experience of happiness is the same. And the same happiness is what is there in the sleep state also. 6-7 hours that you sleep, mind is empty. The whole activity, thought process that is there in the sleep state goes into a shell, into a small little shell, and then gets there, so that the rest of the mind is empty. And then when you wake up, the shell opens itself up and all the thoughts come up, whatever the way that you were thinking. That's why Zen philosophy says that beautifully. A fool goes to sleep to wake up as a fool. A fool goes to meditation to wake up wise. Wise people, what happened? The people who have taken to yoga. Normal man goes to the objective world outside to get that empty space inside to feel the happiness. A yogi tries to do all these activities to see that how you can empty your mind. Therefore, Chittavritti Nirodha is the state of happiness that yoga gives us within you. If you do not care for that Chittavritti Nirodha, ultimate state of happiness, Samadhi, you are doing at the body level. Yes, there is some little benefit that you get. Like, for example, you are bending the body, twisting the body. Naturally, it generates so much of activity at the nervous level, and all those things will draw the energy. Therefore, you enjoy the happiness of the doing an activity. Whereas pranayama is different. It draws the energy, but also at the same time, it slows you down. Therefore, that you are now slowly getting inner control rather than just at the outer control. In meditation, it go much more deeper, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, much more deeper to silence your mind. And all these techniques that we have seen and all these days is where you are using employing various techniques to see that your mind is empty, your mind is silent, you reach that silence. That silence is a state of happiness. So you find happiness in your state called silence, then you don't have to run behind the object outside. Therefore, Dharma says that you are running behind the object outside for the sake of happiness. Once in a while, consciously, you should see that you are able to free yourself from that silence, from that emptiness, not depending on the object outside. This is what, in the form of Sanatana Dharma, our sages have designed. Once in a day, you do that fasting. That's why people take a name of a god, something like that. God's name is nominal. For the sake of Lord Venkateshwara, I do fasting on the Guruvara, on the Friday. I mean, I don't know, whatever it is, that on Friday that I don't eat food. On the name of Shiva, on the Ekadashi day, I don't eat food. On the name of Shiva, Shivratri day, I don't sleep. What do you mean by that? You are actually trying to control your sensory slavery, and then you're coming out of it. You're free from that. So therefore, if you consciously from inside don't run for the food inside, just imagine how strong the force of food that is there on us. It pulls us. Whereas you say, no, today I cannot take food. In fact, I've seen people, their own son's wedding is there, and the girls, people that they provide lavish food, wedding and all that. But then the father says that, no, today is a fasting day for me because basically it is Ekadashi day. I don't eat anything. And he fasts. Imagine all that push that is there, pull that is there from the object outside. And one simple reason that is there, Ekadashi, the control comes from within. If you have a control coming from within to control the sensory organ like that, who is that who is controlling? And the one who is controlling is you. And that's what is called as Sanyama Shakti. That's what is Atma Shakti. And this is what is basically your training. If all that can be controlled by you, that means what about the inner strength, the power of inner strength? That's enormous. That's why we have so many different rituals, so many practices where the control is so important. And when the control is done, that means to say your willpower becomes stronger and stronger. It is the willpower which controls. Every day at 10 o'clock, I have to go to bed. I cannot miss the sleep. But whereas on the Shivratri day, whole night you do the Jagaran. Where that strength comes from? It comes from the willpower. That's why a Western psychologist said, a culture where the inner controls are taken care of with the help of all these rules and regulations and rituals and all that, there are less amount of psychological aberrations. So therefore in Dharma, we have essentially trying to see that you empower your willpower, you empower your Samyama Shakti, and this is extraordinary. All other powers that are there in the world outside, be careful that those powers can enslave you. Whereas Samyama Shakti, willpower is the one which empowers you. Once the willpower is there, any climactic situation that is there, we can overcome that. We can try to help ourselves in that. There's another thing that is there. Love, compassion, these things what we are manifesting in the world outside, when we say that, it brings about fraternity. It's like the way that my 5 fingers are put together, it becomes like a fist. Love brings us together. Hatred separates us out. Compassion brings us together. That's what is very important. Touches your soul. When you go to the soul level, we are all the same. There are no difference at all. A man is going to the office by car. A traffic light is stopped. A beggar comes to him and asks for money, begging. This man sincerely wanted to give him money. He checked his pocket. Suddenly there was a shock. He forgot his wallet. My God. Wallet has everything, my card, this and that, I have to go back. So he immediately wanted to return and then go back. But then he said, let me go to this boy, this man, and thank him, because of him, I remembered about this wallet. Otherwise, I would have landed in office. So he pulled his car aside, goes to this beggar, puts his hand around his shoulder and said, thank you so much. And that beggar was surprised. Why? He said, I wanted to give you money. I'm sorry, I don't have money because I forgot my wallet. But you made me to remember that wallet. Such a great help that you have given me. So that's why I can only thank you, fold my hands to you. I cannot give you any money. Beggar replied to him saying that, sir, umpteen number of people are there who can give me money. But nobody so far came to me, sat next to me, pushed hands around my shoulders and said, you are like me. That's what love can do. That's what compassion can do. Anger, hatred, jealousy, all those violent emotions divide us. Love, compassion bring us together. Therefore, essentially, what we really require is this kind of dharma where love, compassion, these things come up. World becomes a wonderful place living together. We are all practicing yoga. We are all giving yoga. But in the name of yoga, we are doing asanas, we are doing pranayama, we are taking care of health. That's wonderful. But at the same time, let us practice the holistic approach of yoga. Then what happens with it we'll do? We will take the mankind to an altogether different level. Man can become a God man to God level. That's what Sri Aurobindo said. That's the level we can go to. So these are the things that is very important. Now look at the way. A God concept is important to see that we surrender our ego. God is not something absolute. What happens is my God becomes my ego. If you understand properly the way that yoga is understood, then God makes me to surrender. My God will not become my ego. A fellow went to a Buddhistic monastery where all different kinds of Buddhas were there. Small Buddha, big Buddha, and then big Buddha also there. And then everybody was putting that incense for the Buddha. But this man, he brought his Buddha there and then he kept it and said, you know, if I put this incense, it will go to every Buddha, and big Buddhas, you know, they breathe a lot. My Buddha will not get it. So therefore, he should only get that. So therefore, he made a small little paper cone out of it and then lit that particular incense and then put that cone directly to his Buddha's nose, face. Obviously, what has to happen happened. That white marble Buddha picture of his became black because of this suit. In fact, that's what happens. We defame our own gods. We denigrate our own gods. This is what happens. My Buddha, my Kali. In fact, people talk to me saying that, you know, this Ganesha is not right. Whereas my Ganesha at our temple, it's good. Why? This is Balamuri Ganesha, that is Edamuri Ganesha. Wow. The trunk is on the left side or the right side. Wow. All small little simple details. That's why Swami Vivekananda said, temples, rituals, and all those things, but secondary details, we need to rise above that level. When we rise above that level, even the God is for the sake of godliness. Find a God who does not have godliness. How do you call him as godliness? Similarly, this world is a wonderful place, extraordinary, wonderful place. Now, on one side, we say that God, you are great, but your creation, the world, is so horrible. It is like that. That means we are narrow, stuck in that. Let's rise above that level. Dharma is that which takes you above the level of, it already takes care of Nyaya, the rules of the world. You don't violate the rules, but enrich the rules of the world, ennoble the rules of the world, mankind, to a different, higher level. And that level, when we go, see, as long as you are not following the rules, you're afraid of police. That's what is the fear. You are caught up in the fear. Once you follow the rules, you're above that fear. But then once you follow the dharma, then you are above the level of your own inner forces, that your slavery towards the object outside, your anger, hatred, jealousy, all these things are nullified, removed the moment you take the path of dharma, where you practice love, compassion, all these things. If you look into our culture, we have such an extraordinary, wonderful galaxy of these people who are there giving us in that direction. I don't have time to get into various details, but please believe me. This lecture, what I've given, Dharma, what Shastriji has given us, it almost equivalent about 7, 8, 10 lectures. And I'm trying to condense it in a short way, hopefully making some meaning to you. And all this knowledge that I've given actually belongs to Shastriji. I borrowed it from him. You know, his knowledge is so extraordinary. I cannot even change one word from what he has given, and that I pass it on. Thank you so much. I will stop it here so that if there are any question answers, I can take it up.
Thank you, Raghuramji, for a wonderful insight on what is Dharma and how we can rise above our ordinary level of interaction and dealings with the world. I don't see any questions. I think all are stabdo bhavati, tripto bhavati. So can I have all the teachers on video mode, please?
Yeah.
Prabha, Vindhya, Bala, Mukund. Hi, Vidya.
Ah, nice to see all of you.
Vindhya, Bala, Mukund, Dr. Vidya.
Wow. Vidya is also there. Namaste.
Where is Vidya? Okay.
Yeah.
Vindhya?
Where is Vindhya?
Vindhya. Vindhya, can you come on video mode?
And Mukund also.
Yeah, Mukund. Vindhya is not there.
She was there. I saw her name.
Okay.
She's there, but is she unable to put on video mode? I see her name here.
Can you check?
Vindhya, can you come on video mode? And Mukund, is he there?
Mukund and Vindhya?
Bala is there?
Yeah, Bala is there.
Mukund seems to have left, looks like. Okay. Maybe in Vindhya's name, it was Sudhakar who's joined, maybe.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, can Sudhaka also come?
Enter a message that start the video.
Vidya, yes. Let me just click one photo. I hope Vindhya joins us. I hope Mukund joins us. So can all smile here. Thank you.
Thank you all. So can we have all the participants also come on video mode? If you all can start your video.
If you can come on video mode from your mobile or laptop, maybe.
Hello, Maithili ji.
Photo.
Asha.
Yes, very familiar faces. We can see the names are familiar.
Right.
Hello, Amita.
Hi, Aparna. Okay, great. Let me click one
Thank
photo
you
in
all.
this page. 1
Yeah,
second.
thank you all for staying with us and enjoying the Let Go series.
And let me click the another page also. Some
Yeah.
I say
Can you all
I
come
don't
on your
see
video?
other. Many others are not come on video. Some have come, I've taken off, whoever have come on video. Okay. Many have not come. Okay.
Yeah, like Pushpaji, it is how yesterday's talk also we said, right? Inside you are that calm, you are that peace inside. So keep remembering that. Take it as a positive resolve and then deal with the outer world. Yes, outer world will pull you down. Always try to pull you down. But always keep the resolve in mind that I am that Shanta Swarupa, I am that Ananda. Then nothing can, pull you down. You'll always be rising up. Right, Chetana?
Yes, I got a lot of pictures now. People keep
Yeah.
joining in and keep putting their faces there. So I'm keeping on clicking so you can all keep smiling.
Yes.
So, yes.
Hello, Soumya. Hi.
So I hope all of you enjoyed the session. It will be wonderful if you share your feedback in the group. It'll, or takeaway or whatever it is. I see Preeta ji, many people who have attended our yoga for emotional management workshop also have attended
Yes.
here. I'm sure when they attended this also, they could relate a lot of things. It was in the emotional workshop. Yeah. I see people nodding their heads. Yes. Yeah.
We'll keep the group open for one more day because we need to post today's video also.
Yes.
Then later, like Prabha, I think she has sent the link where you can join our main Yoga Bharati group if you want to keep in touch with all our activities.
Yeah. So
I
we
don't
have a
see any
YB Connect
questions
group.
coming in.
We have one group and two groups. One group is already full. So the second group, we have created it. So those who are not part of our first group, you can be joining the second group. And similarly, many people be worried that, oh, there might be hundreds of messages. No, only posts will be there. And from us only posts will be allowed. So don't worry that it will be crowded with my messages. And those who want to be connected to us by Gmail, that is Google Group, you can send email IDs. We have also YBPLR Gmail group where you could get updates of events and all that. Okay. So I'm Prabha Krishna here. My name is written as Yoga Bharati, but I am Prabha Krishna here. So you could send a mail to info@yogbharati.net. So now anyone has any questions, you could type in now. So I'll also become invisible now. Okay.
Yeah, another maybe 5-10 minutes where we can have one or two questions. I don't see any questions come in so far except for Pushpa's, where I said, yes, we have to take that positive resolve every day. Yeah, yoga, the first day we saw, right? Yoga is all about the lifestyle changes. And one of the lifestyle changes is the vichara, the positive thought. How is your thinking process? So every day when you get up in the morning, take a resolve that I am that happy person, I am that ananda inside, I am that calm person inside. Then continue with whatever you want to do. So that is the way to go about. You might forget, in your day-to-day activities, you might forget that you are that ananda, you are that peace. That's okay. So again, next day morning when you get up, take that resolve. So that way you have to keep doing your abhyasa.
One doubt which Amita had brought forward yesterday, I think she also wanted to write before she starts typing itself, I'll convey to Ragramji. What she wanted to ask is, after hearing the different paths of sadhana, karma yoga, bhakti yoga and all that, she was saying that she follows some of karma yoga and some pious activities, that is worship, chanting, as well as maybe Jnana Marga by listening to your lectures and all that. So different things she is doing. So she felt like, okay, so how so I looks like I'm putting my leg in different parts of sadhana.
Sure.
Am I doing the right thing, or is there like I have to only follow one path? So
No.
I hope Amita I have did justice to the question. Yeah.
See, we are a complex personality. We are body, we are also mind, we are also intellect. We don't have only just one particular sensory organ that way. We are a music ourselves. We are a whole music instrument. So therefore, basically, there is need for taking care of all these things. Later on, as we proceed further and further, one particular path becomes like our own the path. You get stuck into it. It's like the way when somebody goes into specialty, then he says, okay, I'm going to be a radiologist in the medicine. Until that time, that there are so many things that our paths are open. Yeah, try to work on that.
Anyone have any questions? You can, we have 10 more minutes, so please feel free to ask any questions. Yes, we would conduct more such Jnana, looks like Jnana Saptaha is also popular as our yoga Abhyas sessions also. We would really plan. Next event, of course, is the Navaratri coming. So let's, we would really brainstorm and think about it. Thank you.
I think since there are no more questions, we will stop the session because I think Raghuramji also has another session at 7:40. So I think we'll give him some breathing space. How do we make donation? I think the Yoga Bharati details were shared in the group, the bank details. So you could maybe do a bank transfer or do a GPay to Yoga Bharati account. So thank you all. Let's end this session with a Shanti mantra. Namaskara Mudra. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina. Sarve Santu Niramaya. Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu. Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhave. Om Shanti. 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 Thank you. Thank you, Raghuramji.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some people have asked us whether from US how we can give donation. From US, Yoga Bharati will not be. If you have an Indian account, then you could transfer it. Otherwise, maybe you could individually transfer to either to me or to Vijaya or to any of the team members. If you are knowing any of us, you could transfer to us, and then we will transfer to Yoga Bharati Trust account. And let me tell you all, those who are very new to Yoga Bharati, that Yoga Bharati is a non-profit trust organization. And whatever donations we receive from all our well-wishers and supporters are used for the, for all the ongoing expenses of running the website and hotline and, what all the usual of the any series of lectures and all that, and remunerating our teachers and all that. So it's run in that way. So nothing is going to anyone's personal account. It's just it goes on a running basis. And of course, the Let Go book is there now. We are collecting a good amount of donations so that we could afford to print maybe about 500 to 1,000 books, and maybe reach out to Amazon and Flipkart to start selling it online. So all this requires that support there. And thank you so much for people who have already donated. And thank you everyone for being part of the series and enjoying the series and giving your feedback.
Thank you all. Bye. Good night.